Welcome to the Sprocket Pod, your podcast for helpful HubSpot content. I'm Cameron Collins, and alongside my co-host Mark Lerner, we sit down each week with experts on the HubSpot CRM to break down cool builds and unique apps that will make your instance better. Whether you're a new admin or you're a business owner looking to get the most out of HubSpot, our conversations are going to provide you with unique insights that you can apply. Don't forget, we host the Sprocket Pod live on LinkedIn every week, and you can catch all of our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. Let's dive into today's episode and get you working smarter with HubSpot.
All right. Love that intro.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's these episodes have become really fun for you and I to be able to do, where we don't have a guest on and we get to break down topics that are going to be maybe a little bit more directly tied to something that is unique to our day to day. And yeah, I'm really excited to be digging into the topic today for how technical should someone in RevOps be, or on the flip side, how strategic should someone who's maybe using HubSpot as a HubSpot admin, how strategic should they be in their role? And I know you talk to people across all different types of roles and all different companies. And
Yeah.
I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah, I got lots of thoughts about this because, I think all of us have kind of been on this rocket ship of change. I mean, for a lot of reasons, but I'm specifically talking about the kind of wave of change that AI has brought, right? Like there have been like shifts in technology that come in waves. Like there was like internet, then mobile, and I think AI is, there was a huge hype train. I think it's kind of settled a little bit, but in reality, I think one of the impacts of it is there's definitely been downsizing in companies where they feel like AI, whether it has or hasn't, makes more efficiencies and makes certain people redundant. And in doing that, some of the internal resources that maybe anyone really would have access to help them on a technical level may have been kind of removed. And, one of the amazing things that AI has done for me over these years is completely democratized access to learning how to do something technical. And I'm talking about code in particular, right? Whatever gaps there have been completely filled by AI, having it, open in here. How do I connect this API to this? How do I make this integration happen behind the scenes? Something that I would have had to open a ticket and there would have been a sprint. I can kind of do in a few hours. And I think not only does that open up a world of opportunity for people in a RevOps role, but I think we're slowly or very quickly kind of transitioning into a time where there's going to be the expectation of that. And so like that's kind of where my mind's at. I don't know where you kind of stand with that.
I've been listening to some earnings calls with public companies, and it's been interesting where a recurring theme for AI has been said time and time again, and that is companies that are likening artificial intelligence to an arms race. And every company wants to win the race in how do I use artificial intelligence the best. And admittedly, when I first heard companies using that analogy, it's an arms race, we've got to win the war, I thought, it's just hyperbole, and companies are exaggerating in the way that they tend to. But I think one of the things that I've realized in my day to day is that it is very similar in the sense that as the end user, we're oftentimes a multitude of steps behind from the companies that are setting all of this up in the periphery. And so, how often is it, for example, where at Inbound, HubSpot announces Breeze, and a lot of people weren't super duper excited, which I think at the time was maybe understandable because we didn't see the big picture. But now, having learned how to use it, there are often times where I can go into Copilot or Breeze and have it create a workflow that it would have taken me forever to figure out how to do, or I might have had to go into Chat GPT to figure out the logic that I really wanted because the initial logic I had just wasn't going to work. So my take is that, I mean, it is so important to learn how to use AI, and being able to do it in a way that is relevant to your role is absolutely going to transform your day to day. Looking at it specifically as an end user, I think does us a disservice, and we need to start thinking bigger picture about where are the companies heading, because clearly they have a direction that we may not be seeing when
For sure.
they're announcing whatever feature they may be announcing.
I mean, I think there's two arms races happening. One is the arms race of companies incorporating AI into their products. So Breeze, for example, or Microsoft with their Copilot or whatever. Every SaaS, almost every SaaS, is kind of adding some sort of AI into it. So there's that. I think there's the arms race of internal optimization within companies. So one of the things that's blown my mind, and I'm still looking for more information, whether or not it was just fluff to get press or not. But have you ever heard of the company Klarna? They're
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
think like buy now pay
Yeah.
later.
Buy now, pay
So
later.
right. So they made a huge, you know, like kind of a splash because the CEO was interviewed for a podcast where he said they've deprecated CRM and all enterprise software. They're not using Salesforce. They're not using Workday or anything, and they're just using AI layered on top of internal knowledge graphs, whatever that means. And that like blows my mind because are they saying that, is it true, or are they saying it to like kind of get buzz, because they did get buzz about it? But if it's true, that's like, okay, we're heading in a world where maybe at some point in the future you're not going to ever really interact with the interface of HubSpot. You're just everything's going to be done through Breeze. You're going to conjure up whatever it is you want in a chat instance, and maybe that's kind of where we're headed.
I think that it's really interesting to think about where, I mean, this might be an internal CRM and they're branding it as a non-CRM. I mean, we don't really know, and unless we can see behind the scenes. But I don't think that like the notion of a CRM is going to go away, because ultimately it's really just a centralized place for your data. What I think we
Sure.
will see is continued adoption of how artificial intelligence impacts the way that we interact and engage with it. So everything from being able to go into your Copilot and saying, generate a list of my top 100 accounts that I want to be able to target, to create their messaging, create landing pages and call to action buttons that are specifically relevant to them. I think we're going to be able to start to see more and more things that are streamlined. But I imagine that it's also going to come at a cost. And we've seen that, for example, with HubSpot moving from the native data enrichment that they've had at the company level to now a credits model of sorts,
Yeah.
where you go in and you pay for contact enrichment. So I don't think that, even though things might be more efficient, I don't think that necessarily means it's just going to become uh, like a freebie plug and play. Just pay $100 and now we can
Yeah.
go and close 100 deals.
Yeah. There was this really another thing that made waves was there was an article, like one of the VC, Sequoia or something, talking about the new concept of service as a software rather than software as a service, which means that, similar to what you're saying, you're paying for an outcome rather than paying for a software. And so the instance you're talking about where the Breeze Intelligence, I think it's called, right? Or what is it called? The credit-based enrichment that is essentially Clearbit. I forgot what they're calling it.
Yeah, I think that's part of their Breeze data enrichment. I
Right.
know that they have like 3 segments of it, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's an example of it, right? So you're paying for an enriched record per record. On the more extreme end, I don't know if I feel like I'm your your kind of insight into like that other ecosystem. But when Salesforce introduced Agentforce, which was I think their kind of breeze, they're charging per interaction $2 per interaction, which is an insane thing. But so they're trying to capture value in a new way, and I think that is something that's kind of I think that's an extreme version of it. Um, but yeah, no, I think kind of getting back to the idea where it feels like everyone needs to be technical. I don't think that necessarily there's a mutually exclusive technical versus strategic. I think that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's no longer one or the other. You got to be both. Um, and um, the reason you can be both is because I don't think, at least for quote unquote simple tasks. Let's say I'm not building, rebuilding product. The knowledge is there, and you have somebody that can walk you through it. I was talking to somebody at one of these events I went to recently, and we were talking about how we've kind of implemented workflows via AI that have kind of really optimized some of the stuff that was just really annoying. And he was saying that he kind of realized there was this huge bottleneck where a lead would come in and the sales rep would have to kind of go to the website and assess whether it was relevant based on certain very specific variables, like does it say this or that. And he essentially, using AI, kind of built a script that did it for it. And that was like the majority of the time that sales reps were working, not on sales. They were working on like doing this research. And he kind of built a script that did it, with AI, kind of scraped it, analyzed it, and then updated the CRM. Um, and he did it kind of being walked through with an AI walking through doing it. And it was like a massive time saver for the company. And so stuff like that, I think, is going to become expected eventually.
And I'm curious what your opinion is on the notion of someone who's in revenue operations. It may not be mutually exclusive to be technical or strategic, but how much of their hand in the technical aspect of the recommendations that they're giving, like how technically inclined do you need to be?
Yeah. Can you restate the question? I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, so someone's in revenue operations, very strategic role.
Yeah.
You're looking at data, you're giving recommendations on how to affect the business. How technical do you have to be with then being able to implement that yourself or understand how to implement it? So, right, it's the difference between I think that the team needs to have better qualified MQLs to SQLs, right? We need to have better MQL to SQL rate. And that's a suggestion. But then how technical does the RevOps person need to be to then say, and here's how you can do that in HubSpot or Salesforce?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're going to be in a place eventually where they're going to have to do that. And even that particular use case, it would be something like going through previous uh, leads that are, contacts that had deals and closed, and, using some sort of machine learning model to assess, creating those qualifications. Uh, I think we're in a kind of transition point. I don't think there's an expectation today everywhere, but there is an opportunity to get ahead of it, and provide additional value. I find myself not hitting any sort of blockers to doing stuff before. If I had an idea about something I wanted to try before, it would often require, I would need, some internal resource if it came to something technical. And I no longer need that. So I could actually kind of test the hypothesis, then bring the outcomes and say, hey, I kind of tested this out, and this was the outcome, and it's a big difference. Um, and I think, so if somebody came in the scenario you're talking about and said, hey, our SQL and MQL conversion rates are super low. We can see it here. I ran the numbers and was able to identify, how we can tweak it based on this. And if we do, I think we'll increase our conversion rate by X%. That's a big difference than just saying, hey, I think our conversion rate from qualified lead to closed one is too low.
Yeah, and I think that this is where job security really comes into play because ultimately, I mean, not only is it the difference between sitting there and going to an executive team and saying, this is what we should do, but it's taking it to that next step and saying, and this is a solution for how we can do it. And so if you're in revenue operations and you know what to do, but you don't know how to do it, then I think you're going to continue to become very challenged by people that can give you perhaps more solid advice or can give more strategic input beyond just here's what we should do as a business.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I'm obviously speaking for my, in the bubble I live in. I'm in a very unique role here where I get to, take risks in certain ways and do some interesting stuff. And I'm sure it's not like that everywhere, but I think everyone should be thinking about how they optimize themselves for the expectations of the market going forward. Um, and I think this is just going to be one of those things. And now is the time to get used to it, so that you don't wake up one morning and you're the guy who fixes horse and buggy carts and everyone's driving cars. Like, that's
Yeah.
an extreme example, but we're clearly in a moment where there's going to be an upheaval in the way people produce or productive in the job market. We're already, especially in tech, there's a lot of there have been a lot of kind of changes in headcount and continue to be. Um, and I think that the expectation of someone being an actually hands-on individual contributor while being strategic and technical, I think there's people that are going to start expecting that. A lot of the headcount that's getting removed is, yes, extreme examples are kind of the easiest way to make a persuasive argument, but I realize. Um, but a lot of that headcount that's being removed is kind of these middle management that I think people are realizing is creating more bureaucracy and bottlenecks than actual productivity. So you see things like companies are getting rid of their product managers and just having the devs kind of take that over, because they felt like this was just kind of a middleman and without any technical skills. And so there's an expectation now of the developers having, so it's kind of going both ways. But yeah, I don't know. That's just kind of what I'm observing, and personally, I'm excited about it because there's a lot of fun to be had, and there's an opportunity to create, to find alpha for yourself, because not everyone else has caught up yet. Eventually they will, but now is the time to kind of grab a hold of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a really interesting point where you mentioned that a lot of developers are expected to start to think strategically. And that's really just the flip side of should revenue operations be thinking from a technical standpoint. Well, if we look at people who are CRM admin or who are developers, and this is speaking very broadly now, I think there is definitely an expectation that they're able to think a little bit more strategically. And obviously, the more value that you can add to your own role, the better it's going to be for you as an individual. But ultimately, if you're, say, a HubSpot admin and you're just sitting there building things all day long, then it becomes very difficult to articulate the value of what you're doing. If you can't say what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it impacts the business, then maybe in a very large company that has someone in revenue operations who can articulate the technical components, that might be okay because now you have a place as a dedicated developer. But especially if we look at this small to medium sized business and these companies that are moving toward enterprise, I think that that's really that niche of, it benefits you to be technical and strategic so you can fill both roles.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of see a world where there's going to be a singularity or a convergence between technical and strategic, and that there's not going to be, I think, the same kind of clean separation of the two.
Yeah.
Um, Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure. Um, getting rid of product managers completely and having only developers manage that, not sure if it's a great idea. I guess we'll find out. I know there's, from what I can tell, kind of a lot of friction between those two groups of people. Um, so we'll see about that. That's a experiment that is now live. I think Meta did it, as far as I understand, and Airbnb as well. Like, there's a bunch of big companies that did it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's super exciting. I think, you know, I love that HubSpot's kind of building this into their product. Having the Breeze AI, um, the opportunity to create custom applications, um, to like kind of fill the gaps that don't exist by the existing app ecosystem. I think is going to be a huge opportunity for admins. If you have kind of a little thing, right, that probably wasn't enough value for someone to create an app to solve, and it's maybe idiosyncratic to your company and may not be relevant to other people. Kind of building a solution in the form of kind of something on the back end for your organization is, and being able to do it kind of on your own without needing to sprint and developers and all these things, is huge value to your company, um, and really kind of sets you apart. And I see all sorts of opportunities there.
And I think that a lot of this speaks into just the notion of career progression because if you really enjoy coding, for example, and that's just your thing and you don't really care to be strategic, there's definitely a career path that is, director of IT or CTO, and you maybe don't necessarily have to be thinking. I don't want to say you don't have to be thinking on the strategic side because there's certainly value, especially as you move toward the executive front, right? But you don't have to necessarily be thinking both the RevOps and the technical side, right? So ultimately, if you are more technical, there's still very much a career path for you. But if you're in this HubSpot admin, CRM admin space, and you're wanting to do revenue operations, you're wanting to do CRM admin work, you enjoy thinking strategically, I think that that's where it's not necessarily um, a new role, but it's just changing the amount that people can contribute because with AI, it's so the barrier to entry is so much lower.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like the when I sit down and kind of think about it, just it feels, maybe this is just like the third cup of coffee talking, but it just feels like anything's possible. That if you can think it, then there's nothing stopping from kind of at least making some sort of solution, the most minimum viable solution you can do it, at least to prove value. It's like if you can observe a problem, um, and kind of understand why it's happening, then you can think of a solution and not need to go through a whole kind of resource intensive process to like actually start working on it. Um, it's very gratifying when you get to kind of do that stuff. So I've just personally, like, over the last year, have been going out of my way to do that stuff. A, to get the experience, and B, because it's fun.
Yeah. And I mean, the important thing to remember is that because all of these programs are free or have a free version. I mean, if you are established in your career and you're not learning how to use these, I mean, just like with everything else when it comes to technology, the next generation is. And I mean, that's
Yeah.
the reality of the situation is the biggest problem that teachers may have with AI right now is with students that are, creating papers or whatever that now you have to try to find a way to detect it. But I think that the flip side to that is you have the next generation coming into the workforce who have that experience of, oh no, for us it was go onto Google and I mean, people could plagiarize that way. Well, now it's using AI. And so the reality is that if you're more established in your career and you're not already playing around with it, you have people that are. And that's just the next round of competition for, being able to balance what is going to become expected of any given role.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's like, the way we interact maybe with a generation or two above us with or the way that we see them use the technology that we're very comfortable with, like a smartphone or something, or try to get them on a Zoom call. And especially during the pandemic, it was, kind of this hilarious meme. But I know that for me, I don't want that to happen. Right. I want to be ahead of the curve on any sort of technological change, um, so that you can be get the value from it and not be left behind. So I would suggest to all the folks out there to try to do the same.
And I remember not this past inbound, but the inbound prior, Dharmesh Shah said a quote during one of his keynotes where he said, "Inbound will take your job, but it will open up one that you can love even more." And at the time, I didn't really know what
You mean
that meant.
AI will take your AI? Not you said
Yeah,
inbound will
AI
take your.
will take your job
Yeah,
and it will open up a better opportunity for you.
yeah.
And I didn't really understand what it meant at the time when he had said it, but I mean, again, if we go back to this example of using HubSpot and um, being able to use Breeze to just do things that maybe previously I couldn't have done on my own, or it would have taken me longer to figure out how to do it. It's not that I would say I've lost what my job was, but really what we're talking about here is just the evolution of a role. And everyone's jobs are changing in so many ways, but ultimately it's incumbent upon us to go in and play around with Claude and Chat GPT and Breeze and just all of the different platforms and figure out how can I use this to enhance my day to day.
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with what he's saying. It depends on which you he's talking to, because there are people who it's coming for their job and their job won't exist, right? I mean, if you look, unless they're at the top 1%, right? So if you look at something like freelance writers, um, there was a huge industry of people churning out SEO content, freelancers, and if you follow the Reddit groups of those people, they've been decimated, right? All of them, have, unless you're the best of the best of the best, and if you are, then you're getting a lot of business, but there's not a lot of room at the top. Not everyone can be in the top 1%, right? So there are people, right? If you're not striving to be that, if your job was really just kind of papering over inefficiency uh, in something, and not really being strategic in any way, right? You're just kind of, you know, clocking in and clocking out, or kind of putting a thing in a peg in a hole or whatever. That's not going to last much longer. You have, that's what it kind of comes back to. You have to, the technical and the strategic, I think, is the thing that keeps you in the game.
Yeah, and so if we use maybe the most straightforward example, someone who's a developer, you sit here, you code. I mean, you're in JavaScript, you're in Python, you're developing all day long. Do you foresee AI making that obsolete?
Listen, I don't want to sound hyperbolic, right? But over the last week, I on this have been kind of working on my own little side project where I essentially built a React application using a database and serverless functions and headless CMS and all this stuff using AI. I'm not a developer. I don't even know I didn't even know what those words meant, right? And over the last week, I kind of did it. And so, yeah, if you're a junior developer whose job is to just someone sends you a ticket of write this code, it's just not going to be around much longer because the ability for a non-technical person to have access to that knowledge and have someone actually essentially walk them through doing it if they can articulate what it is they want is going, those junior people who are really not the ones thinking about what the end product is and they're just kind of getting a ticket to fix a bug or whatever, they're not going to be around much longer because, maybe this is an extreme example again, but anyone can do it today, right? If there's a bug in a code and I sit in front of it, I copy paste the bug into the chat window and say, hey, why is this error there? And then after maybe 20 minutes back and forth, we kind of figure it out and we update it, right? And that's only going to get easier. So yeah, if you're a junior developer and you're not thinking about how can I also be strategic in some way and be kind of thinking about strategy about where this goes, the moat around your technical abilities is just not as deep as it once was.
Do you foresee someone who is strategic being wiped out? So you're that same developer and you learn how to think strategically about what needs to be developed, why, how to
Yeah.
implement it, where to go next.
I mean, listen, I think you give yourself the best chance, right? The only chance to stay, to keep going. And everyone always talks about how whenever there's a technological innovation, jobs are lost, but jobs are gained in ways that we never imagined, right? We don't even know what, the infrastructure or whatever that's going to have to support this, change. And so there's probably a lot of other jobs that are going to be made that we don't know exist, but they might require training and it'd be a hard shift. Um, you know, so yes, if you're strategic and technical, you could be replaced. But I think the only people, I don't want to make absolutes here, but basically the only people that are going to be the ones that thrive are going to be ones that have both, that can do both. And it's maybe not happening tomorrow, but you know, the ability to do it is there for anyone, or most people. And so you can kind of make yourself more valuable. Um, and I think people are looking for that. I hope.
I mean, a year ago, I got frustrated because I would go into ChatGPT, have it generate code, and then I couldn't run the code in ChatGPT. And I was like, ugh, now I've got to go get another program and figure all this out. And it is mind blowing to think that we've gone from that to where now we have agents that can essentially run on your computer. And we know it's not perfect, but I mean, it can do all the things for you now.
For sure. I mean, we are, if these are the things that we're seeing, right? These are the things they've released. Like, who knows what's in the pipeline in the skunkworks right now, right? Um, you know, I suspect there's a level of holding back. Um, you know, for all we know, the AGI is already, there in OpenAI's office, and they just aren't releasing it yet. Whatever that means. So yeah, I mean, the level of innovation and disruption is really it's big, and you know, I've always, there were a lot of other kind of false starts. I think the big one I can think of is, and no offense to the crypto folks out there, I'm sure you can give me a million reasons why crypto is valuable, but there was a huge hype wave around it, and everyone should learn about it and what it is. And it's, yes, Bitcoin's crushing it and all this, but NFT stuff, like I was very skeptical and I remain skeptical. And I think maybe some people were jaded by that because they see this other kind of hype train coming in and they're like, it's just, it's another crypto, whatever. But they're very different things. I mean, I can explain to you why AI is valuable. I still can't explain to you why there's any value
Yeah, I
in
mean,
the token.
even if artificial intelligence didn't have more development from where we stand today, and we know that's just, I mean, there will be continued development. But even if there weren't, I mean, there's so much value that's been added just by what we have access to today publicly. And so
For
one
sure.
can only imagine where we're headed as we move toward AGI and an even stronger capability. It's good. I mean, it's going to be amazing. And so I think that over the past year for myself, speaking just for me, I've definitely gone from being someone who was on the more skeptical end. I know I saw value in it, but I was certainly on the more skeptical end to certainly realizing, no, this is something that has a day-to-day impact, and you've got to get with the program. And so for myself, being on the strategic side, being in revenue operations, it definitely means learning how to use it so I can become more technically capable myself. And then again, if you're on the
Yeah.
flip side and you're more technically inclined, use it to learn how to think strategically.
And that, I think that transition is at least for me to conceptualize is tougher because I wouldn't, you know, the technical information is basically information, right? You just need to learn information. How do I do this? Strategy and strategic thinking and all this, like, it is much more abstract to me, at least. Like, how do you explain that? There's thousands of years of philosophy around it, but like, I don't know. So I actually have empathy for people coming from the other direction because I wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very different skill set from you think technically, you're developing, you're thinking strategically. And I'm going to overstep and say I think that people can learn beyond their comfort zone, because even for me to learn coding and even to do it with artificial intelligence is a big, there's a learning curve there that's pretty significant for me. And so if we flip it, it's certainly not easy, but to your point, um, if it gives you the best shot for growth, development, for stability, then I mean, ultimately, it's just how safe do you want to play it? How much do you want to learn? And to your point, where do you start? I mean, it could be anything from a HubSpot certification on revenue operations up through reading books on business development strategy, philosophy, revenue operations, etc. So
Yeah.
it's certainly not an easy transition, but I think that to your point, if it's going to give you the best chance, it's one that people should be thinking about today.
Yeah. And like, that's for sure true. And I think thinking strategically might be my default. So it's like not something I really ever kind of think about. It's just always kind of the thing that my mind has always been kind of training on. Um, but if you are coming from the other direction where you're strategic and you want to incorporate something more technical, I would say the lowest hanging fruit is just kind of observe the various workflows that happen within your organization, whether it's success or sales or marketing, and the bottlenecks, the challenges. If you see something that breaks a lot, or if that you're like, why do they need to download this CSV here and upload it there? Like, that's crazy. If you see something like that, take it down, sit down for a minute, open up ChatGPT, and kind of work through how you could, how you might be able to automate something like that and present it. Um, and A, it's very gratifying, and B, you might kind of start establishing some additional value for yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it won't be easy, it won't be overnight, but learning a new path for career development never is.
For
Whenever
sure.
someone undergoes any type of career change, there's going to be that learning curve. And so this might be our opinions on this podcast episode, but it is certainly something that one should be thinking about because, I mean, to the point we made earlier, if you're not thinking about this today, the next generation, they certainly are. And so I think it's
Yeah.
incumbent upon all of us to do what we can to elevate our careers and educate ourselves as much as we can.
And elevate our minds. And there's so much knowledge to learn, and
Mhm.
there's the opportunity for an infinitely patient sidekick to walk you through it that will never get frustrated or to call you dumb.
Yeah.
But like you said, what I'll end with is that these are opinions, and we all know what they say about it.
And we'll almost certainly be revisiting this episode 12 months from now, reflecting on the developments of artificial intelligence between now and whatever happens a year from today.
Stay tuned.
Mark, always a pleasure.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you for tuning into the Sprocket Pod podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode with your co-hosts, Cameron Collins and Mark Lerner. Be sure to catch us live every week on LinkedIn, and don't forget to subscribe to our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. If you found this episode valuable, please leave a review and share it with others looking to get more from HubSpot. Until next time, keep driving success with your CRM, and as always, Sprocket on.